Hello, guys. Happy Wednesday on SJU. I'm Eric. We got Kim. We got Lon. We were just having a preview of the same conversation we're about to have for you guys.
Second run conversations. Get into it.
Love it.
It was a run through. But we're going to talk about the Miss Marvel trailer, which just came out yesterday. Marvel Studios' new trailer. And we're also going to talk about Netflix, who are have a new little attempt trying to crack down on people sharing accounts. And we'll talk about another Captain Kirk entering the mix. Can you have too many Captain Kirks? We're gonna find out, and then we'll do some chit chat with you guys in AMA. So let's start out though with Miss Marvel, which we got the full trailer. There's actually we've had a couple of little teases going back to December 2020 when I think about it, but finally a full trailer and also a date, Wednesday, June 8th, which we'll get more to some interesting conversation about that date. But yeah, Miss Marvel, this will be the next series after Moon Knight. We got Moon Knight around the corner, and then this one's coming. We didn't know for a while if it would be She-Hulk or this. But yeah, we our first look here. What did you guys think of the Miss Marvel trailer?
It looks cool. I love this approach that they're taking, and they're taking with all the Marvel shows. It feels trying to give them their own personality, make them feel separate, but also, in some ways part of a whole. And this looks like it's going to be kind of a coming of age school set comedy. And it reminded me of Turning Red, the recent Pixar movie, actually, and the themes it tackles with this girl from a different culture trying to fit into both worlds and finding her own identity. And then also getting superpowers. But this one doesn't turn into a big red panda.
No, not that we know.
I like this too. I thought this looked like a lot of fun. And I really like, we've seen a few trailers, I think, in the last few weeks that are really, I think, starting to showcase the long-term impact of Into the Spider-Verse, that like, the idea of using animation in ways to like enhance the storytelling, that it's not just this like CG photorealistic perfect animation, but like in the trailer where there's all these like doodles around her and she kind of lives in this comic book inspired world. I hope that's baked into the series and not just for the trailer, because I thought that was really cool and a different sort of visual way to present some of these kind of ideas. It was also a few trailers this week that I think like we're starting to mess around with animation more and get creative, I think, in the aftermath of that.
I think so too. It reminded me also of Mitchell's versus the Machines and Katie's Doodles and Katie Vision. But that, of course, that movie shared DNA with Spider-Verse.
Right. I think we're in like a post Spider-Verse era where that kind of like woke everybody up to like, oh, you could do more than just try to.
Oh, it's woke. Like... Is that what you're saying, Lon?
Yes. That's what I'm saying. I'm saying we've been silenced by the woke mob. That's what.
Because of the genre that it's drawing from, that kind of kids TV, I suppose, is borrows this kind of thing, doesn't it, as well? So it's borrowing from that kind of animation. I can't think of anything off the top of my head that does it, but I've seen it plenty of times.
But yeah, I like that. And anything to kind of mix up the aesthetic or sort of customize it a little bit to this world and this sort of corner of the MCU. It looks fun.
Yeah, I think these TV shows have benefited from, because even though I do think, the movies, certainly plenty of them have, their own vibe going. There's not as much room as these TV shows have to like really be like, this is a very distinct thing we're going for here for 6 episodes.
Right.
And so the shows so far have really kind of felt, and this certainly does not feel like I'm watching like, oh, this is just like WandaVision or Falcon and the Winter Soldier. And that cartoon stuff helps a lot. And I think it reminds me of those things in very positive ways. And like you said, Lon, I'm assuming it's in the show, but I also, you can't be 100% sure. Was it just done for the trailer?
It could just be for the trailer, but I hope not. And it is a cool idea for a way to make this feel visually distinctive. And I mean, look, whether you agree or not, fair or justified or not, that's a big knock that we're seeing a lot against a lot of these Marvel things, is like, well, they all look the same, or they all kind of look like TV. And so I do think it's a cool way for them to kind of expand the aesthetic without changing what makes Marvel feel like Marvel or making it feel like too out of step. Because obviously this character's gonna be part of the MCU. I mean, she's in Captain or the Marvels, I guess we're calling it.
Yes.
So yeah, like, so this isn't just its own little weird corner of the MCU. This is we're staking a claim to like a new character that we're going to integrate into the main storyline. Yeah.
They're using music really well to kind of demarcate it, to give it its own tone. You know, here you've got Blinding Lights by The Weeknd that plays over it, and I've just watched some of Moon Knight, and that uses songs as well to establish a tone, which I'm really liking. It's a really effective way of separating them out.
Yeah, and I also, I know there's a lot of caveats with what I'm about to say, which is like there was the Marvel TV did Cloak and Dagger and Runaways, and of course there's the Spider-Man movies, but this is still the first Marvel Studios produced show that'll be about like high school character and living in that realm. And I think that's such a like familiar realm from comics of like high school student by day, superhero by night, and I'm very excited. I think it's a fun one for them to delve into.
And we also just got, which I've not seen other than the pilot. Naomi just debuted on the CW, which is kind of it's interesting. It's like the DC sort of take on the same kind of world. Like, what if you were just an ordinary high school kid who loved superheroes and then you became one yourself?
Yeah, it's funny. I saw a couple of people that were like, this looks like a CW show. I'm like, you're just saying that because CW has shows about high school character superheroes, but that's not something they invented,
Yeah.
Right. There used to be that like, oh, this looks like a CW show. That to me is a very specific look. I don't even necessarily think that's a knock, really. Like those early seasons of The Flash, it's like a lot of fun. Yeah. Like, I don't think there's anything that wrong with looking like a CW show, but it meant something specific, and now people just use it. I think just anything superhero they don't like. It's like, that's CW.
It reminds me a lot of Shazam as well. Which was, I love Shazam, so that's cool if some of the same humor comes through. And but we've had Spider-Man, who is at school, and also Kate Bishop, who was a bit older, but it's interesting to it's similar in that they both hero worshipped Avengers. Ms. Marvel is seen in the trailer with her t-shirt on, and I think one of them is Kate Bishop on her t-shirt. I think
I was trying to tell that too. The third character is Wasp and Captain Marvel for sure, and then I was trying to tell who the third character was.
It's not clear by any means, but
that would require some kind of a time jump. If Kate Bishop is now established enough to be on merch.
right.
Well, maybe, yeah.
Although I will say the question, because it's from the comics that this is a character that hero worships Captain Marvel. There's a very big question mark about how well known Captain Marvel is in the MCU.
Yeah. Oh, I was discussing this on Twitter last night, actually. Whitney Seinbold tweeted about this. I think that makes sense to me. Post Endgame, because we established in Spider-Man Far From Home, I believe that's the one, we established like there are podcasts and docu-series that like have walked people through, here's what happened with Thanos. Like, here's the battle that the Avengers had against Thanos, like roughly minute per minute, like Black Panther did this, and then this happened.
Wasn't
like,
Darcy and Jimmy Woo arguing about who?
Right.
Yeah.
Like, and I mean, even I think in Eternals, people seem to have like a conversational familiarity with like who did what in the whole Thanos debacle. Right. So I feel like Captain Marvel's incredible contributions at the end of Endgame, obviously people have heard about this. Like the word got out that she single-handedly took out that whole war.
That shit, yeah. Plus, I will say the 5-year jump gives them so much leeway to say, hey, she came back to Earth many times and helped them a bunch of times, and then she went back to space each time after.
Yeah, she wasn't just having Zoom calls, she was coming back every once in a while.
And she got a haircut every time. Every time she'd come to Earth, she'd get a different haircut.
different haircut. Gotta mix it up.
That'll be its own miniseries. There's some fan kerfuffle, and I don't know how familiar you guys are with the source material. Do you even have a big opinion on this? But her powers are clearly altered from the comics, basically to make them more like Captain Marvel. In the comics, she's pretty much a shape changer, but in very cartoony ways. Like the one big nod in the trailer is the giant fist. but she has these sort of like ballooned up body parts. And when
it's not Mr. Fantastic, but it feels a little bit like Mr. Fantastic powers, even though it's not those powers at all.
Right. And that's why some people wondered, did they not want to like have like the stretchy character before they do Mr. Fantastic? If you guys don't have a big opinion on this, we can move on for the most part.
Well, I mean, I think it's a shame because I would love to have seen that, realized it would be something really different. But you're right, you know, maybe they don't want to preempt Captain Fantastic.
Mr. Fantastic.
You say Mr. Fantastic. Yeah, I knew I'd said that. I knew that was wrong when I said it.
Captain Fantastic will get his own show in 2 years.
Yeah. But you know, she seems to get her powers from a mystical bracelet in the trailer, doesn't she? And it makes her a bit more generic, but ties her more closely, I suppose, to Captain Marvel.
I really don't think it's the Mr. Fantastic thing. I think it just looks silly. And I think I think that even in Fantastic Four films where they're really locked in, like Mr. Fantastic is famous enough that you can't really change his powers. They avoid using it as much as possible because I think that other directors have like Josh Trank and Tim Story realized it looked kind of silly and de-emphasized it even in those films. And I think that there were probably some screen tests or some VFX tryouts where they looked at it and were like, this looks too cartoony. And I think that it's tone. Like if you were doing like a Plastic Man show or something, I think you could totally pull it off with a comic tone that this guy's powers are goofy and he looks bendy and it's kind of silly in that heightened sort of reality. But this looks like they're going for a bit more of a genuine, sincere, coming of age, relatable comedy drama lived in vibe. And they maybe didn't want her to like grow a huge hand and slap people as her power. And this makes it something feels more like in line with the rest of the MCU. That's my
Yeah, and given the failure of Inhumans and, you know, the comicness, the comedy of Medusa's hair, I think probably I agree with you. They probably wanted to move away from that and felt that it could become silly because in the comics, the character is Inhuman, right?
Yes.
So you can't give her, since it doesn't seem like they're going to do Inhumans now, she can't, you know, walk upon a Terrigen crystal. So you already have to change the origin. So I don't know if maybe that just momentum took it in a completely different directions because now, it appears to be some type of quantum energy band or something.
I really think they could have changed where the source of the power comes from and kept it if they wanted it to be the bendy thing.
A Hadron Collider or whatever. They could just
I think it was very much like, oh, this is kind of goofy and we don't want to lock ourselves into a whole TV show where like we always have to figure out like, oh, she's gonna like make her head big and like do this with her foot and like I don't know. To me it makes sense why you would do something with energy fields instead.
Yeah, I think it's a combo of all that. Like I think that, you know, they want her to, you know, be this sort of you know, eventually she's going to be directly working with Captain Marvel, of course. So sort of aiming her towards being a protege of Captain Marvel. Also I feel like like the goofiness is a huge factor. And then the Mr. Fantastic of it all, like, because I saw some people say, oh, it's kind of crappy they couldn't give her the powers because, like, he has to have the claim on it. I was like, yeah, but, you know, it's not like they're not putting a bunch of other people in Iron Man armor, but it's always like, he came first. Iron Man came first, you know?
But, I mean, there's so many characters that are like, they're the big, strong one. Like, I don't really think there's that much sweating, like,
the stretchy?
I don't think there is like a rule of like only one character per power set. I mean, like, what's Drax's power set? Like, okay, like big strong guy, good with weapon. Like, it doesn't matter. It's like nobody cares about that. I think it's kind of the same. Like, we stress out about that because that's what we can see in the trailer. But this is going to come down to performances and the writing and the tone. And like, how much do we love this character and want to spend time with her?
Yeah, and I think it was the worry, just like basically what you're saying, Lon, is like it was almost like a distraction if she had stretchy powers.
Exactly, that's exactly what I think. It's like that kind of sets you in a sillier world, and if you don't want to be in that world, now there's like this weird.
Yeah. And I mean, cynically, they're right to know that the people complaining the most are also guaranteed to watch the show. So
if you already knew Ms. Marvel's powers before seeing this, they know they've got you already.
Right. Let's continue our debate what we were talking about right before we started that I mentioned, which is just the date of this show is interesting because it's going to debut on Wednesday, June 8th. The Wednesday's not a surprise. That's been their slot. What is a surprise is that's 2 weeks after Obi-Wan. And so it basically means this will be the first time Obi-Wan is premiering Wednesday, May 25th, that we'll have these big high-profile live action Marvel and Star Wars shows running concurrently, at least for a few weeks. It looks like on Wednesdays, unless Obi-Wan veers to a different day after premiere date, it looks like we'll have a Marvel and Star Wars Wednesdays, which did surprise me. What did you guys think about them sort of leveling up with their big properties here when they put out these shows?
I don't think it matters in these days. You know, it's not linear programming anymore, and people will watch both if they want to watch both. So you know, I think the conversation will around the both series will continue for the whole week before the next. So I don't think they need to stagger it.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, that's what I was saying before. I feel like the whole idea of counter programming at this point, like, hey, if you've got Disney Plus, if you care about these, you'll watch 2 shows in a week. You'll probably watch 2 shows back to back if you care enough about it. And, so yeah, I mean, it makes sense to me. I feel like two shows isn't too much for some people in a week.
I guess I'll be the slight dissenter here because ultimately it's not going to like hurt the viewership of either. I totally agree. Like if you were going to watch both, you're going to watch both. It does surprise me a little only because Disney Plus, you know, doesn't have a lot of huge shows. These are their big shows, their bread and butter. And the reason we heard, and it makes sense, that they switched to Wednesdays in the first place was to not have a new episode of a Marvel show coming out the same day as a new Marvel movie, just to not split sort of like that attention and that focus. So because they don't have that much, I just figured, oh, you know, why not put Obi-Wan on Thursday or Miss Marvel on Tuesdays or Thursdays just to spread out basically like that sort of coverage and the fact that everyone's going to do their reaction videos and we're going to do our convos and all that stuff. Just to like make sure you're kind of getting a little bit more out of it. Ultimately, again, like people will still watch them. But given they have the days of the week to spread out, I guess I'm a little surprised they didn't do it, but I'm sure they have their very specific reasons above my head.
Maybe one of them's terrible and they're trying to bury it.
I do think, I hope it's not that. I do think there is something to the fact that Obi-Wan is so much more high profile just because it's a show about Obi-Wan Kenobi, and Miss Marvel's unknown. You know, Miss Marvel's selling point to mainstream audience, not the people who complain about her powers being different, is Marvel Studios. So I do think they might almost feel like, hey, you know, this show will need a little bit more, you know, because it's not based on a pre-existing character and it doesn't have a big, you know, star like Oscar Isaac even with Moon Knight. So maybe it almost is seen, even though it's not airing at 8 p.m. or 9 p.m. after an 8 p.m. show. It's almost like, hey, you're watching Obi-Wan on a Wednesday. Here's a new Miss Marvel as well. You know, maybe
it's the new lead-in. It's the new Supervisor lead-in.
I mean, I do think there's also something to the idea that a lot of these streamers are now going for, they've sold you on the idea like we have stuff to watch, like we have content you want to see. And now there's the idea like we've got a lot. We've got like a stacked library. We've got a glut. And so like all of them are releasing these like look ahead at the next year where it's just like an onslaught of new content, like 20 titles coming at you, or like Netflix, like celebrities breaking the fourth wall of their own movies to be like, watch me on Netflix. And I think that this might be part of that too, like starting to stack multiple debuts in 1 week is like, look how much content is coming out on Disney Plus. We're literally releasing Marvel and Star Wars shows on the same friggin' day.
Right. You cannot let your membership lapse.
Right. And I do think that psychologically they are trying to like put that idea out there. Like when Paramount Plus has one investor day and they're like, here's 50 new shows we're working on. They are trying to get across that idea of like, you will miss out on a ton of stuff if you don't have this platform.
I also think, and this is more speculation from like an internal way, like you can do all the stuff your departments need to do at the same time. Your social media promoting it, your archival content managing, but like my schedule pivots around Honest Trailers coming out every Tuesday at 10. And we put Honest Trailers and Honest Game trailers out at the same time. And then my kind of process for doing all the jobs is the same each week. I wonder how much other departments are just like, let's just release them both, and then our schedule stays the same. It's
Wednesdays is all hands on deck day.
Yes.
Yeah. It's like,
It could be. Well, it's so funny because we have these conversations, and so often the answer is something like weird, like you wouldn't, like it's like dumb and quotidian that you wouldn't have expected. Like one thing that always gets talked about that I've heard, and I don't know if this is true, this is just what I've heard, but the idea, like, why do they always bring it, like, why do new things have to come out at midnight? Why don't they come out at like 8 p.m. on the East Coast or 9 p.m. and then midnight, and like, why don't they stagger? And it's literally so internationally, they only have to make like one poster with the date on it. Like they don't have to be like coming May 17th when it's actually 16th in the United States and 17th in Europe or whatever. And like that's why, like that's actually the reason. And or why did new music and DVDs used to come out on Tuesday? Like that was literally like restock day when like there was Tower Records in the warehouse. And like that's why stuff came out on Tuesdays. And it was like that for decades. And so it may be something silly that we don't even know about this process, like that what Ryan was saying, that behind the scenes they're just like, this day works out better. That day we've got another thing.
Right.
Maybe someone important is on holiday.
Right. It could literally be like, Chapek is going to be in Lake Como that week. So
he just can't make it on Thursday.
Got to bump it up by a week.
So we'll move on from there.
He's on the Star Cruiser that week. He can't make it.
Thank you guys so much for watching. Subscribe to our channel if you haven't. Videos every weekday. Hit that like, hit that bell. Let's talk a little Star Trek here, because Star Trek Strange New Worlds is coming very soon. That's the spin-off of Discovery about Captain Pike and the earlier crew of the Enterprise. But they made an interesting announcement for season 2. So we haven't even seen season 1. But they announced for season 2 of the show, which is already filming, that Paul Wesley of the Vampire Diaries fame will be playing James T. Kirk. I don't know if he's a captain yet. Looks like he's a captain in that picture. In season 2 of this show, which I was surprised by. What do you guys think about another? This is interesting because we know Chris Pine is coming back as Kirk in a new Star Trek movie. But now we've got another Kirk. I mean, this show already, Strange New Worlds is already going to have Spock and Uhura as regular parts of the show. What do you think about throwing Kirk into the mix too?
I mean, it definitely makes you, the casual fan, excited for watching the new series, right? Knowing that they're going to get Kirk at some point, I would think. So that makes sense to me. And personally, I'm happy to see a new Kirk. As long as he's good. Ask me again after I've seen him. But for me, the GOAT is always Shatner, but there's room, there's lots of room for different Kirks. There's lots of room for different Hamlets. Why not Kirk? Why not Batman?
Those two, the greatest Western canon characters, Hamlet and James T. Kirk. Yeah.
Tiberius Kirk, yes.
I feel like, you know what? I'm usually pretty cynical about making your fictional universes smaller by doing stuff like this, but Star Trek's earned a lot of goodwill on this front from me. We've had many decades of Star Trek shows that really have expanded the cast, expanded our horizons. Like, they have not been relentlessly covering the same little chunk of time over and over again. They take big swings. And I've always admired that about the Star Trek franchise. And even today, Picard is not going over the same territory as all the other shows. Lower Decks is exploring different stuff than all the other shows. So I feel like, okay, if they want to have their reference nostalgia show, it's their chance to go back and take the victory lap and remember Uhura and Kirk. Oh, okay, I feel like at this point they've earned that amount of goodwill from us, and we should go along with it. It's not the most exciting thing in the world to me, but all right, I'm going to let them have this one.
I am curious, because we know very little, so we have no idea. Will he be a series regular, or will he be on an arc or something? The whole show, by the way, is really, they're really pushing Strange New Worlds will be very episodic, very classic Star Trek,
right?
Going to a new planet each week. So I'm curious how he'll figure in. I also wonder, Chris Pine pointedly did not try to do a Shatner with his performance, which worked because it's an alternate reality. But Paul Wesley is playing, it's supposed to be in canon.
Yeah,
he's supposed to be the same guy.
Shatner.
Yeah. So I am curious how much he tries to do Shatner. I almost said
I feel like you can't you can only try to like do. I think what Pine does so well is like every once in a while he'll put a little moment. He'll pepper it with some Shatner. Like at the very end of the original Star Trek movie, that first one, that 2009, I think, he just walks in at the very last scene. Is like him walking in and like sitting in the captain's chair on the bridge, and he does it in the most Shatnery way imaginable. And it's just like one little scene, but it's like, oh, okay, he's like taking on the mantle of captain now, and he's becoming the Kirk we know. And I think you got to do it like that. You got to be a little sparingly. If you go in doing like the bones, like the big impression stuff, I think it's going to fall apart.
Yeah. So we'll see. But I'm hopeful, hopeful as well.
Yeah, I mean, I like the idea of episodic Star Trek. Like Picard is so, I like Picard, but it's so the other way, where it's so like peak TV, like one plot per season, and we're like really deep into it. I like the idea of going back to the old school style of like, hey, what's going on this planet? Let's check it out.
All right, and then we'll leave to go to the next one.
And that's my gut, is that this is not like Kirk is on every week and we're like doing Kirk stories now. It's like they're gonna have one adventure where we meet up with him and whatever starship he's on before the Enterprise, and then like maybe they'll bring him back for an episode in season 3. Like it's gonna be a runner, but not an every week thing, because that's cheap.
But then we see if they can't resist giving him his own spin-off.
I mean, that's obviously where their heads are at long term, of course.
They could have used de-aging technology, I suppose.
Get 90-year-old Bill Shatner out there?
Yeah, well, Lon, yes, how you tweet that this is their chance to, they could, No Way Home this. They're going to have 3 Kirks.
We're going to have 3 living Kirks. We're going to have 3 living Kirks. That's, you've reached an into the verse quorum, Right. So who knows? Anything is possible.
Anything is indeed. Let's talk about if it's possible for Netflix to stop people from sharing accounts, though. This is
my theory. No.
Netflix is going to start launching a test to try to curb people sharing accounts outside of their own household, and the idea is to get people to pay an additional fee for users outside their household. Sounds like so basically they're not saying like, oh, you have to have your own separate account, but if it's someone not living inside your house, it's a few extra dollars for them to be like a buddy on your account. They've talked about how they've kind of put a blind eye to this for years. Now they're going to do this limited test, prompting users to enter their credentials to they say nudge freeloaders. They're going to test this in Chile, Costa Rica, and Peru. The thing I don't understand here is, it doesn't sound yet, and this will change everything if they get to this point, that it's like they're rolling out technology that'll sense you're sharing outside the house. I think they're trying to get more people to be guilt tripped into it. But what do you guys think will be the end result of this?
Well, I think ultimately they will block people outside the address from accessing it, because you might get a few people being honest and doing this, but otherwise you're right. If you still can share for free, then, and you're doing it already, people will continue to do it. But it is stealing, and I'm surprised that they haven't clamped down on it before now. I think ultimately they need to block in order to make it work.
What do you think, Lon?
I mean, I think that we're just starting to see now the sort of streaming era. We've been gliding on VC money and like free money for a decade now, and it's just been so frothy, and everybody wants to get in on this and have their own streaming platform. And there's been nobody really paying attention to the financials. And now we're starting to get into the era of like, oh, we're spending $10 billion on content in the next 3 years and have no real way to make that back. So I think we're going to start seeing a lot more stuff like this, of like, everybody's going to have to start testing the waters of like, how much can we push people to pay us more before we risk losing them as subscribers? Because all of these platforms, they're all making more content than they can afford based on what they're bringing in right now. All of them. So they're all going to have to either find ways to like get you to sign up with even less shows, or get you to pay more for the shows that they're making. Like it's one of those two. So yeah, I think whether it's trying to get freeloaders off, or whether it's nudging it up by another $1 or $2 every year or two, like we're going to start seeing so many of these on so many platforms. I mean, I do think we've seen people are very resistant to switch. Like if I signed up for Netflix, it takes a lot for me to give up, unsubscribe, and go subscribe to Paramount Plus instead. So I think they're going to just keep tweaking it until they find that point where people start actually leaving.
Yeah, I think first of all, I do agree with you, Kim, that it's like at some point they'll figure out the technology to just block people from using it outside.
Oh, I bet they already know. I bet they could already flip a switch.
Right. And they don't
like,
want to yet.
We know what your main IP address is that you use Netflix for, and any other IP that accesses it just
right.
I bet they could do that today if they want.
And one day they'll probably do that. Yeah, I think, it's like Netflix, look, I mean, they grew so quick and, to this amazing extent. And it's at this point, it's a sort of familiarity, right? And that's what they count on. And like I had a discussion on Twitter the other day with someone who was like, do you think the new Scream will eventually be on Netflix? And I had to be like, no, because it's a Paramount movie and Paramount's going to want to keep that on Paramount Plus.
It's already on Paramount Plus, folks. Get over there.
So it's unlikely it'll ever be on Netflix, but people have that. They still look at Netflix as the place to look for anything. And I'm just curious how much it'll take to get people out of that habit. Because yes, if a day came when they were like, look, we're just blocking you from sharing across addresses, unless you pay a fee, like that might be their thing. Yeah. How many people would just drop Netflix versus how many people would be like, I guess I have to get my own subscription.
Right.
And I'm sure they'll have to kind of look at, weigh that all out. Right.
Exactly.
And try to figure out how many people.
And they're gonna keep making these incremental changes until they feel like they're at that point,
Yeah. It seems like it's leaning that way. But yeah, I do think
we're really in this moment now where Wall Street has suddenly like contracted and realized Viacom, or I guess now they're calling themselves Paramount Global. They announced on their big earnings report Investor Day, we're going to have a new movie every week debuting on Paramount Plus. And then the stock tanked because everybody was like, they can't afford that. So then Bob Baggers had to come back out and be like, every other week, we're going to do forget everything I said. Right. We're going to do every other week now to salvage because, so like that's across the board. Every investor is like, why are we spending billions of dollars to get these streaming subscribers that then don't pay us the billions of dollars back that we need to recoup?
Yeah. I'm curious, how quickly or not we'll see any results from this test. But
pay Mike Myers to play 8 roles. That ain't cheap, man.
That's right. That's right. From an obscure American Axe Murderer joke. Why not? Let's do some AMA to close this out here. Simon Smith says the superhero craze began with realism. He puts the quote from the first X-Men. Well, what would you prefer, yellow spandex? Have we looped all the way back to 60s Batman? I don't think we're quite there yet. Where do you guys think we're at with the how far can you go into embracing the craziness and these superhero adaptations?
I don't think we are quite there yet, but we're getting there. And I will be very happy when we do. But not to replace, some of the stuff we've got, not to replace the dark takes on Batman and, the MCU, but stuff like as an exaggerated version of Shazam that does take it closer to 60s Batman, I would like to see exist alongside. But yeah, I agree with you, Eric. We're not there yet.
I feel like there was this moment in the early aughts where you had like Sam Raimi doing Spider-Man and Bryan Singer doing X-Men. And there were legitimately, it could have gone either way. Like we could have gotten a Raimi-esque, filmmakers coming in and bringing their own really gonzo, anarchic visual style to it and making comic book movies that really feel like aesthetically like comic books, or be like, we're going to smooth it all out and make the comic book stories feel like mainstream action movies. And that's kind of where it went. You got Nolan and then you got the MCU, and they kind of codified that as, okay, we're taking comic book stories, but then putting it in our relatable universe. But every once in a while, you get like a Venom movie that feels like it's from that other reality where Raimi won. And I love that stuff. I wish there was even more stuff like that exactly like what Kim was saying, where it's just expressive and it feels weird and individual, and more like taking the anarchic sensibility of a comic book to the screen rather than what if Batman was a real guy and he had real guns and weapons,
Yeah, I think it's that middle ground because look, I mean, like I'll be hyper specific here on costumes, but it's like we'll almost never get like the '60s Batman costumes, which were like the comic books, they were spandex and unflattering. Now they like look, the costumes always have to have layers and piping and things to not make them look like just a really tight costume on someone that might not look as great on a giant movie screen. But I think that there is at least, look, we've come a long way from X-Men not wanting to have those costumes. I think when we get the MCU X-Men, they're going to be wearing much more familiar suits. But I agree with both you guys that, yeah, I like when they can kind of get a little goofier as well. And I think we're seeing that toe being dipped in more and more as we go forward. Lovetto has a question here. Assuming a lot of these Marvel shows, the Marvel Studios shows on Disney Plus are going to go on to be movies, what is the best TV show turned a movie with the same cast? So he meant like not The Fugitive, but like something like Downton Abbey and The Simpsons, he says, are his faves as far as like when they took a movie and they did a TV show and they did the movie version. What is favorites for you guys?
Well, I'm going to go with, there was an old British TV series, a sitcom called Are You Being Served? Lon knows it.
This was my grandmother's favorite show. My whole time growing up, I used to go like watch TV with my grandma, and she would put on Are You Being Served? She thought it was hilarious. She loved
it's set in I think it's a gentleman's outfitters. A department store.
But you're right, in like the men's department.
Yes,
of a department store. Yes,
and it's all about the humor that arises from these characters. And in the film, they did a movie version, and I think they all went on holiday together. I can't remember, but I love it. And another similar thing is On the Buses, another old sitcom, and they did a movie version of that. And I watch these every year at Christmas. And I mean, I never remember exactly what goes on in any of them, but I love watching them. So those for me. But Are You Being Served? I've had to pick one.
I love the world of like British sitcoms I barely know about. It's like it's so fascinating.
From the 70s is what you know.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, first off, I think you have to note the Jackass film series here. Like they made the continuation possible. Like after MTV was like, we can't legally keep putting this on television. The Jackass films came along and sort of like kept that spirit alive. I'm wondering too, here's my question for you guys. Do the Muppets count in this? Because you had the Muppet Show, and then
I say they count. You
kind of took the vibe of the Muppet Show and then brought it to the movie theater, and I love those as well. And then the last one that I would point out would be the Naked Gun films from the files of.
I was going to mention that as well. Yeah, Police Squad, a bomb TV show, although very funny for its 6 episodes.
Yeah. A delight if you go back and watch those old Police Squads, but then of course fully realized in the Naked Gun film.
Yeah. Couple times they just repeated a joke from the show, and that's okay. Leslie Nielsen was a star of the show. They recast some of the other roles, like his partner, although the same scientist I remember was on both the show and the movie. That's a great one. Wrath of Khan, of course.
Jackass.
Yeah, I agree with Lana, Jackass. And then I'll say I just went and watched this movie at Alamo Drafthouse the other day. Twin Peaks Fire Walk with Me, which I know is
really good.
Very divisive when it came out, but I'm a huge fan of that movie. Yeah. And all the weird, dark Lynchian places it goes. So
and then Mulholland Drive, fascinatingly, was like also gonna be a TV project.
It was a TV pilot.
That didn't work out, and he retroactively made it.
While we were talking, I was Googling Kim, Only Fools and Horses, which I had never seen or heard of, but it was a very successful British comedy series that they were going to do an American TV show version of many years ago with John Leguizamo. And I just remember when I was at IGN and we were covering it and doing some news stories about it, realizing what a big deal it was. Like people were very invested in the casting of this show as we are with like superhero movies. It was like, who's gonna play?
It's huge, Eric. It's a huge part of our national identity. That show. And
that title, we would never call a show that in the US, and that's why I love it.
It's currently a stage show in London.
Amazing. That's great. Let's see.
This happens a lot more in the UK. I feel like there's a lot of the examples I was thinking of, because there was also Ali G and Borat carried through. And then the other one I was thinking of was The Thick of It and In the Loop, which then sort of became Veep almost. Like,
yeah, certainly sort of the same DNA, literally with the creator, but also just the vibe of it. Here we'll do a real life question here from TN. How do you guys take your coffee?
I like a little bit of sugar in it, but no milk or cream.
Oh, yeah, just milk, or I do like a bit of cream if I want to treat myself, but no sugar.
The opposite.
I've never liked the taste of coffee, so I'm just one of those people who gets like what are straight up pretty much shakes with the frappuccinos. So that's
I'd rather have a cup of tea, Eric, if I'm honest.
But I will drink the pumpkin latte because I'm a basic bitch and I do love my pumpkin. So
I will also say, when I was in the UK, they don't. The coffee's not very good. So like a lot of people in the UK are like, well, I much prefer tea, and it's like I drank tea as well when I was in the UK.
Well,
because your coffee's.
Was that fighting words, Kim? I want to know.
I mean, it may have got better since. You might still disagree, but I think it probably depends on where you go.
I mean, I was just going to like, I was in London for much of the time.
Next time you go, Kim will give you
like
the good coffee.
I'll give you some good ones, and you can give me your verdict.
All right.
Tell me if I'm misguided.
I didn't mean it to be like that. It's something I'm just saying, like, because it's not a coffee culture, and there are people who really like give a crap. I think you're not exposed to good coffee over there. So if it's like, the crummy Starbucks versus a good cup of tea, I get why you would go with it.
Look, only fools and horses stands up. I can't speak to the coffee in the UK either way because I didn't have it.
No.
Well, on that coffee debate, and Kim, we'll take your coffee recommendations.
Yeah, I'm curious to try now.
We will wrap up here, guys. Thanks for joining us as we talked about Marvel, Star Wars, coffee, all the fun stuff, and we'll be back with plenty more here this week at Fandom. Take care. Thanks.